Thank you very much. Good morning, all. My name is Nav. I'm the Commercial Director at ZenZero. I'm representing Resolution IT today. In the interest of clarity, I'm the one on the left. Today, I'm going to be talking about how we hacked into a bank. How we hacked into a bank whilst the target was up in the air, flying at 30,000 feet. So it's all very James Bond, Mission Impossible style. Let's get through the boring stuff. This was a real incident, so I'm going to run through the case study event by event, how we actually reached our objective. And names, places have all been changed to protect identities. We did this, carried this out in the confines of the Computer Misuse Act and other applicable laws. So, seatbelts on, trays in the upright position, let's get started. If we cover the basics first, so what is a red team? A red team essentially replicates the techniques and tactics of a real-world hacker, a real-world bad actor, and I'm not talking about the Hollywood ones. These are people who really mean harm, and if they have enough time, enough tools, and enough willpower, they will break in. And it's also easy to explain what a red team isn't. A red team isn't a pen test. A pen test has confines, it has a scope. A red team has one thing, it has an objective. So in this case, the bank gave us an objective, is to gain domain control over the environment, so basically keys to the kingdom, and that was it. How we achieved that objective is literally down to the time that we had. And who's a red team applicable for? You know, who's a good client? Who does it suit? Ideally, a red team needs a blue team to be offset against. What's a blue team? So we're looking at an organization that has good security practice, good defenses. They've invested in technologies. They've invested in tools. They've invested in procedures. They have a SOC team. They have good governance, risk and compliance policies in place. And that is a good start. And those are the kind of teams where we'd offset our services against. Okay, so let's get started. How did we start the engagement? We start at the beginning, and the beginning is all about intelligence gathering, and this is probably the most important phase in the engagement. This takes the longest time, and this delivers benefits right till the end. We gather information about the client from open source, publicly available information, so websites, news articles, social media, and we create a dossier. And a dossier we'll keep referring back to, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit later as well. We create scenarios. We create attack scenarios, not one, multiple ones, so that we can keep burning through each individual one as we get to the next till we achieve our objective. Okay, so after the scenario development, we also set up environments. We actually set up an environment because if you're looking at banks who have very mature security infrastructure and standards and tools and techniques, they will not accept anything incoming from a very newly registered domain. So we register domains, and not one, we register multiple ones. So if you burn through one, you move to the next. If you burn through the second one, you move to the third one. You get my point. Okay, it's time to attack. Once we've gathered all this information, we start with something basic. We start with email phishing. And there's two reasons we do that. First one is, again, we're still continuing to build a dossier. We're still continuing to develop and gather more information about the bank. And how we do that is, one simple way is we look at LinkedIn, and we see either new users or we see users who've left the organization, and we send them an email. We get a bounce back. We look at the footers, the headers. We get information on the AV tools that they're using. Again, it goes back to the dossier, and we keep building that intelligence up. It's really, really powerful stuff. And then we move to the attack phase. So second one is we actually send out email. So pen tests, by their very nature, are pretty lazy. So if they can find an easier way in, they just stop, meet the objectives, and move on. As you'd expect, this didn't work. The bank had very, very good security tools in place. So our emails with a malicious link, with a malicious attachment, didn't get through. So it's time to move it to the next step. And the next step in social engineering, along with email phishing, is telephone phishing. And it's a It's an acquired trait, it's an acquired skill. And my colleague who was actually successful in doing this is with me in the audience. He'll join me later on. I won't talk about his checkered past, but he's very good at telephone phishing. So we're supplementing our email phishing with telephone now. So what we did is we created a very simple email, something very straightforward, very time-bound, very time-critical, so there's a bit of pressure around it, with a very innocuous link. And the link literally took you to a 404 error. You're not able to access the link. And if you're not able to access the link, please call the IT helpline. What we did in the background in preparation for this is we registered IT help desk number on Skype. And we used the same area code. We used the same digits to match the bank's IT helpline number, but just moved a few digits around. So even people who know the number, on a busy day, they'll miss it. And then we selected a subset of users that we wanted to send it to. So we were purposely avoiding sending it to the IT security team or the IT team, or people who are very easy to pick these things up. And then we sent it out to a smaller user group, and then we waited. And we waited till one person called. And that one person seemed to be in a bit of a rush, and they really wanted access to this document. So my colleague Abs, he answers the phone. The person raises the case, and Abs, being the professional as he is, he said, "Can you run me through some security questions?" He asked him some security questions. We don't know if the answers were right or wrong, we just took them, so it made it look more authentic. And this person said, "Hey, I can't access my document." And Abs said, "Well, that's all very good. I think we're facing a problem with corporate devices. Could you do me a favor? Could you enter this URL into your personal device?" And he didn't ask any question. He went to the personal device, entered the URL, and in the background, we're actually seeing this live. So he entered his login credentials, username, password. Abs said, "Could you also give me your Microsoft Authenticator code?" He gave him that. We were in. Excellent. So we're doing this live while he's on the phone. So we're into one Office 365 account in the bank. Great, very pleased with ourselves. Because of the reconnaissance we'd done earlier and the intelligence gathering we'd done, we knew that the bank had two authentication methods. One is Microsoft, and the other one is RSA. And those of us who've used RSA in the past, you remember that RSA generates random digits, 6-digit codes. But an RSA also needs a 4-digit PIN, which only the user knows. And just as we were finishing the call, my colleague says, "Just before you go, I know we use two authentication methods. The second one for your VPN, I understand. But could you give me your 4-digit PIN?" Without thinking, we had that as well. So we had the username, the password. And whilst we logged in, because Microsoft Authenticator doesn't stop you, we went and installed our own version of Microsoft Authenticator. So we're fully in. As a user, completely legit. This is all very good. We're very pleased with ourselves, and we go and gather data as much as we can about this one person. And we know everything about him. So there's a lot of information that we can gather. We can go on SharePoint. We know everything about where he lives, his office address, his locker number. We know his Ashley Madison account. We know where he sits. We've got everything. And we're collecting this data. But we're always thinking that this is all very good, but we're still only in the online cloud account. We've not really accessed the bank's corporate infrastructure. And that's where the keys to the kingdom are. Until we reach a document called How to Access the Bank's IT System. Amazing. And this literally tells us that how we can VPN into the bank. Very pleased with ourselves. So, okay, what do? So we said, okay, we need to find a timeline. So I'm going to go back. We need to find a timeline where this user's not online. Because when you want to VPN in or remote access into the corporate infrastructure, you want to make sure that this particular user is not online, he's not there. Even if he gets any alerts, he's not there to pick it up. We had a big problem because this user was a workaholic. Like, he was replying to emails at 3 a.m. He was replying to Teams messages on weekends. It just did not stop. And this was a problem for us. But equally, because we had so much data about him and the amount of information that we'd gathered on this one individual, we knew that he had upcoming business travel. And he was going to be flying. And we also had to make sure that between all those business travels, the flight's not very long, because then you can access Wi-Fi, and he'd be working, knowing him. And we need to find a flight hop which is short enough to know that he's going to be offline, but he won't have Wi-Fi at that point. So we found his details. We had his passport details. We had his itinerary for travel. And a true Mission Impossible style, we loaded flight radar, and we waited for him to board the flight for it to take off. And then we had a 3-hour window to do what we needed to do to carry out our attack. As soon as the plane took off, we were on the phone to IT, posing as this individual, saying, hey, I'm on my business trip and I've forgotten my phone, so I don't have my RSA token. I don't have my authenticator. So IT said, yep, no problem at all. We can install a new one for you. It is going to invalidate your original one, but we can help out. But before we do that, let us ask you some security questions. They asked, we answered, we were in, because of all the information we had about him. Now, at this point, we're very pleased with ourselves. So we managed to get a QR code onto the email account for this individual. We scanned the QR code, installed our authenticator, and at this point, we're thinking, great, now we can VPN into the corporate environment. We're all sort of high-fiving, backslapping, and thinking, this is great, we're in. Not quite. We hit a roadblock. Once we put all the credentials in, we were blocked. We were blocked because our devices weren't corporate registered devices, which means we had very secure, very compliant devices, but they weren't corporate managed, so we couldn't get in. And the time's ticking, right? Like, we're already 1 hour into the flight, and we know we only got 2 hours left. What do? We go back to our dossier. It's literally like the Trump dossier. It's like so much fun things in there. We keep finding new things, and we realize that there's a test VPN link we found in there. And we thought, let's give that a try. And we gave the test VPN link a try, and we got in. And after the fact, after the assessment, we'd found out that this test VPN link was actually created for another pen test company before we were engaged. So it had very lax control, and it had all the access as the corporate VPN, and we were in. And within this time, the individual's still in flight. We're still rushing. We're gathering information. And at the next stage, we find passwords everywhere. And as my colleague says, there were so many passwords. There was password for you, for me, for everybody, enough to go around. Till about half an hour, 40 minutes later, we don't want to even see any more passwords. We found so much. There were passwords which had expired, but knowing human nature, all you had to do was change 23 to 24, and we were in. So we had access to local admin. We had access to ESXi servers. And we're feeling very, very pleased with ourselves at this point. And we got to a point where we think, okay, this is great, but how do we get to a point where we can actually get domain admin credentials, the keys to the kingdom? Because the individual who'd engaged us, commissioned us to perform this red team assessment, had left a red flag, had left very specific information in a very specific place that only if we access that information, we can say that we've been successful. So at this point, we decided we've got to carry out one final attack, and it's a one chance because the idea is to go undetected. Because the moment you're caught, it's game over. The blue team wins. So we decided on a Tuesday morning, 3 a.m., the team wakes up, has a few coffees to get them going, and we said, how do we do this? Okay, to keep it simple, let's not deploy any tools, because at this stage, you can deploy ransomware, you can deploy software to get command and control of the environment, but SOC would pick it up anytime you deploy something. So we were living off the land, not deploying anything, completely traversing the network, going undetected. It's all very slick. So at this point, 3 a.m., we said we're going to log into ESXi, and we're going to bring down one of the 7 domain controllers. We bring it down, and we copy the hard disk onto the ESX server that we got on, and we bring the domain controller back up. This was under 2 minutes, and anybody watching or monitoring, it would have been just one blip, and they just wouldn't have noticed at that time of the night. Great. What do we do next? So we've got the information. We use something called 7-zip, and we extract the password database from that hard disk. And this is all happening live. And it's all happening at something past 3 a.m. And we'd recognized that about a week ago that there was a proxy misconfiguration setting we'd found in the bank as well. So using that, we created a very simple file server on our end. We encrypted the password database and extracted it. And this is only between 3 a.m. and about 3:08 or 3:10 or 3:10 in the morning. All happened within 8 to 10 minutes, and we were out. What we're sitting on right now is, although encrypted, every single Active Directory password for the bank, every user, including domain admin credentials. We'd got in, and now it was time to complete the attack. Now it's time to find the information. We spent the next 3 days decrypting those passwords, and we found, in the end, over 3,300 passwords we'd decrypted by that point. We'd managed to get domain admin credentials. This is keys to the kingdom. We're at a point where we could shut the bank down. We found the information that we're supposed to find, and we met our objective. And this second attack all happened within that 8-minute period. So this is the interesting bit. We put this up because although it looks very linear, the timeline, this was a 4-month engagement. It wasn't linear. There was so much happened. There were so many different scenarios that we went through. There were so many times we're pulling our hair out, a lot of frustration, things weren't working. And the scenario I'm talking about today is the one that did work, and we managed to achieve our objective. And it's interesting to see that you can see the timeline from when we started in January and when we completed until late April, and the team that was involved. For those of more technically minded, do find us. We can actually run through the whole algorithm of how we actually achieved the objective. It is quite interesting. Why did this happen? The bank had they spent tens of millions of pounds on security. They have the state-of-the-art system. They've got a SOC. They have a SIEM. Why did this happen? User awareness. Very simply, user awareness. But also, not just user awareness, it's been users being rushed. Users not paying attention. And all it took was one person. And there was so much that happened in the background, which kind of consolidating the details. All it took was one person and one call for us to be able to get to a point at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday morning to be able to access the keys to the bank. What are the analysis? What's the impact of this? All this is very obvious. We all know this. But the far-reaching effect of something is not immediate. If a bad actor, a hacker does do this, they don't do something immediate. They sit in the environment for months, for years. And what they'll be looking for is not just the bank, not just this corporate environment. They'll be looking at third-party suppliers. They'll be looking at international transactions. They'll be looking for something a lot bigger. And the impact of that is not just financial or reputational, because that is immediate. This can have far-reaching effect if you look at the whole ecosystem of third-party suppliers. It's phenomenal. It's very scary. So when we did present this back to the bank, a lot of red faces, a lot of angry faces, a lot of embarrassed faces. And one of the things they asked us, they said, why didn't you deploy tools? Why didn't you deploy ransomware? Why didn't you do something more aggressive? And the biggest learning here is we didn't need to. There was enough tools and techniques, enough technology available to us that we could go undetected for months, for years. And we could extract so much valuable information from them rather than shutting the bank down, because a ransomware would have been the easier thing to do. And that's scary. And that's really, really scary. So they have a whole transformational change. And we're talking about a major bank here. They have a whole transformational change as a business, how you can stop something like this. And yes, we do take it back to that one individual user. But the impact is phenomenal. It's huge. From our side, yes, we can help. There's loads of things we can do. Do find us at the stand afterwards. Ab's my colleague who was the one who actually hacked the bank. He's actually doing a live demo. He'd be happy to talk you through, happy to answer any questions, happy to take any further requirements as well. I know timelines work very well, but I wanted to leave a little bit of time for questions, and I'm here as well as my colleague.
Thank you very much, Nav. Any questions from the audience, please? Here is your opportunity to talk to guys who do it for real. Stuart. Hank, two texts, and Carla or Sandy will bring you a microphone.
Hi there. How did you navigate the permission to act? Because obviously taking a domain controller offline, potentially in high availability infrastructure is probably okay. You knew that. But what kind of arrangements did you have to scope the boundaries?
It's an interesting one, perhaps.
Yeah. All yours.
Hi, so it's not our first red team, so we knew something like this could happen. So we agreed with our point of contact, and that's very important when we do these assessments is if the SOC team is, obviously the SOC team is unaware, but one person within the bank or the organization must be aware. And the reason genuinely is because the SOC team will start navigating the authorities when they pick up our tracks, maybe the NCSC or similar. So that point of contact was annoyed at 11 p.m. saying, look, we're in, and we need to get the password hashes from the domain controller. Do we have your permission? He said, give me 2 hours. 2 hours later, he said, do it. So we obviously questions were asked, such as how long will it go down for? And we said, we're pretty confident that no one will notice because you have another 6 domain controllers. Think about it. In a bank environment, if your domain controller goes down, you can't cease business operations. So there has to be a formulated backup plan, which is those other 6 domain controllers. So we got 2 hours. They responded. We took it down. Within 15 minutes, I think it was at least 5 minutes for the domain controller to get back up. And within 15, we had extracted the password hashes outside of the environment. And then, to be honest, there was a laptop that was on fire. That was my laptop running for a week. And it's an off-the-shelf product. It wasn't a massive password cracking rig. 3,000 passwords. And I said, look, we can either stop here or we can essentially formulate more server architecture to crack even more. But the point had been proven. But you're right, how can you just switch off a domain controller? We gave them that benefit of doubt. We gave them that kind of courtesy call, but an attacker would not be concerned with that and will switch everything off straight away.
Yeah, and they didn't notice. That was
no
the main
one
thing.
noticed.
No one noticed it.
They went through the logs and said, we didn't even notice the blip. So that was pretty interesting from our point of view.
Andre, 2 ticks for the microphone, please.
So I have a jobbing interest in OSINT and SOCMINT. So how important was the OSINT SOCMINT investigation within this red teaming exercise? And more importantly, what's your advice on how to manage not just your company social media, but your employee social media to prevent the kind of data scraping that you used within this attack?
So OSINT is highly valuable. I think the majority of the timeline was spent on gathering intel. It was so invaluable because when we got to the point where the VPN essentially said your device doesn't meet compliance requirements, in any other red team that you would crumble because it's like, okay, we've hit a roadblock, we've proved to a certain point that the security awareness training is flawed, but we can't get any further because the technical controls are pretty good. Until we realized there was test.bank.com through our OSINT. So that, how invaluable is it? Is highly valuable information. And it's one that we kept going back to. And we had separate teams within the red team. And that's one thing to take away from this is not one individual can do this assessment. It requires a team effort to the point where, when I received that call, post the phishing email, it was my red team listening on the call that said, Abs, get him to type it into his phone. And straight away I came into action and said, put it into your personal device. And the question posed is, well, that's my personal phone, but you use it for MFA, don't you? And we all trust our personal phone for Authenticator. Why wouldn't you trust it when IT tells you to type it in? So that OSINT was very valuable. The kind of information within the team was valuable, and we kept going back to it. How valuable is it as a corporation, as a kind of an organization looking for new business? At the end of the day, I use it for both. And I can't, say here, take everything off social media, don't have your company architecture and organization on your website, because you need that from a sales kind of perspective. But an attacker also uses that for malicious means and to their advantage as well, unfortunately.
Yeah, one of the learnings was simple changes. Like, I know this is not the OSINT related one, but one of the learnings was Microsoft Authenticator. There's no rules around how many instances you can have, because that was the key thing for us. As soon as we got in, we installed our own, so we could log in whenever we wanted. And if you restrict that, then you've got a little bit more control. Very difficult to control people, OSINT-wise. Very difficult to control what's on social media. but adding that level of control would have stopped it. We wouldn't have been able to install the second version. That was another key thing.
Just for the benefit of those in the audience who perhaps aren't the hardcore cybersec guys, could one of you guys just give a two-sentence explanation of what we mean by OSINT?
So that's open source intelligence. Literally, it's what everyone in this room does on a daily basis, using the internet, finding information out about your friends, your family, your colleagues, competitors, etc. All of that information is easy to find out there on the internet. Everyone's voluntarily providing this information now. Unfortunately, we use it as a professional service to gather intel on an organization, and actually it's structured and architected in a formulated way so we can keep coming back to it during the red team, because you can't keep all of this information in your head. You must document it. It's not just the internet, it's not just threads or Facebook or Snapchat or whatever the other cool kids are using these days. It's kind of the information a little bit beyond that. So it's news groups, it's kind of forums, Reddit, and perhaps a dark web as well we use. But most of the information everyone just gives away on LinkedIn.
And it's just to give you an example of how scary this is. We had a separate engagement where we were looking at a board of directors for a company, and it says, can you do an OSINT on the board of directors and see what you can find? And we only found what was available, partners' details, birthdays, details of the children, school, nieces, nephews, dogs. Once we have all that information, we can put it through a tool. Would randomly we use that information and generates passwords. And just with that information, we could generate 9,000 variations of the password, and that invariably gave us enough to get in. And that was just open source intelligence gathering, and that wasn't even anything specific that they'd shared about the business, personal lives. And it's very easy to do that now.
Exactly.
Two ticks for the microphone, and Sandy is right behind you.
You said that it works best, red teaming works best if you've got a blue team. I imagine not many organisations have blue teams in the Channel Islands. How essential is it, and can you still do some sort of effective red team assessment without a blue team?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there is a lighter version, which is objective-led testing. So rather than a pen test, as you know, you can test your network, you can test your applications. Objective-led is you do give us a target, but we can do two variations on that. We can do, yes, we'll go for the target, but we won't be testing your absence of a blue team. But what we can do is we can also go one step further, and we say, let's test your internal controls. So we go with an assumed breach model where, yes, we're in, but once we're in, how far can we go? So red team has different variations to suit most clients.
Absolutely. There's definitely different layers and elements to this, and should be scoped from a bespoke perspective. So we have tailored services available for the Channel Islands, and we're happy to discuss those. So for those that haven't seen you can trust this and scan that QR code. I promise it's not anything to do with me.
But funny, everyone says that.
Yeah.
Or to be fair, you can catch us on the stand where I'm doing the live hack demo of this, and we can have a follow-up call to work out what the next steps and best processes are for you.
He's not even in sales.
I'm not even in sales.
Any more from the audience? I'm just going to throw one final one at you.
Sure.
A little bit along the lines of what others have said. If you had to pick one thing for us all to do to make you guys fail, what would it be?
For me, unfortunately, we do not live in a passwordless world yet. Most technologies are slowly ramping up their passwordless technologies, using the Authenticator app as a means of getting in, not just your password. But the surefire way we get in is through weak passwords. So if you're using the same password for a number of different services, which most of us probably are, adding an extra exclamation mark or changing it from 2023 to 2024.
Yeah.
The one thing that you might be thinking, well, what about brute force attacks? And, you've got account lockouts. None of that is applicable when you have the password hashes on my laptop, offline, and leaving that laptop running for a week. I'll get in. If you're using weak passwords,
From my side, we're all very polite. We don't ask the hard questions. As we looked at the physical security assessment this morning, we open the gate, and nobody challenges anyone. It's the same thing, whether you're on the telephone, whether it's physical security breaches. If you are unsure, let's stop being as polite as we all are. Do ask the hard questions. That's a big one.
Andre's got one more.
Go for it.
So have you ever used third parties to get in? I've done a fair bit of TPRM as well, third-party risk management stuff, and it seems to me the access given to an awful lot of third parties is far too excessive. And they must be a very lucrative way in.
So, I mean, if you're referring to the kind of vendor side of it, the kind of attack chain, supply chain, etc., there usually is a way in through that method. And a lot of the times, even perhaps, I wasn't in attendance of the physical side of it, but essentially we replicate vendors and third-party suppliers. So when we see during OSINT or other news posts to say, you know, we've partnered with so-and-so providing telecoms and etc., we will masquerade as them to get in. So third parties should essentially be audited in the same way you would if you were choosing them. So absolutely, we can assist with that particular model. Although we've got an entire governance, risk and compliance team that do the non-technical side of it and the policies, procedures driven kind of approach. I must admit that's not my area. I'm more of the hacker. So if you're interested in either or, we've got capabilities of all of that within the team.
We do that. We do SEQs for third-party suppliers, and a lot of and we've done some work in the Channel Islands as well, where whether it's a investor firm with loads of with a group of companies, we go and make sure that every single company is compliant from a policies and procedure perspective. And this is less tools. This is more about are you doing the right things. But I think you were also talking about what access they have into your environment. How do you control that? Goes back to the basis of the policies and procedures, and you can have something very, very, very good, very stringent. Where companies fail the most is regular checks, because the landscape's changing, the threat landscape's changing by the minute. You have to go back and check whether the same policies and procedures and the security stance is still relevant. And I think that minimum we say do it twice a year. So.
Gentlemen, we're bang on time again. We're on a roll.
Yay.
Brilliant.
Very good.
Now from ZenZero, locally known as Resolution IT. Thank you very much indeed.